I started with 72 pairs of actual boots and 500 empty boxes to make it look like I had more boots than I had. I have 300 employees, not counting the manufacturing. Every one of them is a valuable asset to the company.
Hey team, welcome back to another episode of It's All About the Team. And we're fortunate today to have a great Youngstown State University Penguin, dear friend, amazing businessman. I'd like to welcome Rick Blase. Welcome, Rick.
And I always get mad and I say, oh, geez, I can't watch anymore. I get sucked right back in. Deep down, I'm a diehard Browns fan. I was always consumed by how do we do this better?
Success isn't linear. There's ups and downs in the world, and if you're tough enough to handle the ups and downs, you're going to be fine.
I've never used the word I in my business in my life. You're only as good as everybody that works for you. And all of a sudden, a little thing called the internet popped out. Hi, Jim. How are you?
You know what? I'm excited to have people hear about your journey, because as I've gotten to know you for the last, it seems like a long time, I've been amazed at the lesson I used to always try to teach my players, and now my students, and now I guess citizens of Ohio, is that success isn't linear. There's ups and downs in the world, and if you're tough enough to handle the ups and downs, you're going to be fine. And I've just marveled at the success of what started out as Rick's Ranch Wear in Youngstown, Ohio, 47 years ago?
It'll be 47 in May.
47 in May. Our listeners and viewers nationwide will know it as Rick's Boot Factory.
Boot Factory Outlet.
Oh, I'm sorry. See? Sorry, viewers. It's changed. I'm an old Youngstown guy. It used to be Rick's Ranch Wear. So it's Boot Factory Outlet in 8 different locations.
Yes.
And then Boot Country in Nashville.
Yes.
And so a lot of the people listening say, oh, shoot, I've been there. Or I wear their boots or whatever. And so take us through briefly the ups and downs of the building of the business, and then we'll kind of go back and we'll review lessons learned along the way. But give us the trajectory.
Well, I started when I was 23 without enough money. I thought I had enough. My calculations were wrong. By the time I built the fixtures, put up a sign, I really didn't have enough money for the inventory. It cost me more than I thought. So I started with 72 pairs of actual boots and 500 empty boxes to make it look like I had more boots than I had. And that was the start of it.
In Youngstown?
In Youngstown.
Okay.
First day of business, I was ecstatic. I did a couple $100. And at that time, in 1978, I thought I only need to do about 300 a day. It was a small one-person operation to break even. The next 5 days, not one person walked in the store. Wow. It was very disheartening. So now I had to figure out, now I got to get people in the store. I got to advertise. And I started advertising. It started growing. First year, I lost money, but I didn't lose a lot. And it didn't deter me. I said, I see a light at the end of the tunnel. Next year, I made money. I made more money the year after. It kept increasing. And I got to the point where I thought, this is really good. And all of a sudden, a little thing called the internet popped out. And people came in the store. They would try it on, pair of boots on. They would go home, order it on the internet for $10 or $15, $20 cheaper, free shipping, and there was no tax on the internet at the time. And it was killing my business. And all of a sudden, my profit was quickly disappearing. And I had to figure out, what do I do now? And had I kept going on the same way I was always doing business, I would have been out of business. So what I did is basically sold everything that we owned except the house we were in, and I got into manufacturing. And that took quite some time to be fruitful. It took multiple years before, our brands became recognized. We tried to do a better quality than the bigger companies. We supplement our boots with all the big companies anyhow. But that was the start of when I knew there's a light at the end of the tunnel and that I could keep going and that I would be able to create a good business. But it was
What year was it that you started manufacturing?
It's been about 25 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
So right at the turn of the century, roughly.
Yeah.
Wow.
And the manufacturing is key. Without that, I wouldn't even be here today.
And did you still just have one location?
When I first started doing that, I had a couple locations. But I would have had 0 locations had I not done that. The brick and mortar that had always been successful for everybody was becoming extinct. People could go online, they could buy it. And this was even before Amazon, which totally changed things. So to make a brick and mortar successful, you have to have something that they can't get on the internet. And that's what we do. We have our pricing structure is such that if somebody comes in and Googles a product now, they're not going to find it cheaper. And that's really a key part of the business. That was kind of the trajectory of the business. But along the way, I was always consumed by how do we do this better? And how does my team do it better? Your philosophy on the team and kind of the football thing is I've never used the word I in my business in my life. It's always we. And you're only as good as everybody that works for you. And a lot of people don't understand that in business. They think I'm the owner. I know best. I might know some things, but without the team and without making every single person in the business important and letting them know they're important and letting them know they're part of the team, you're setting yourself up for failure. I've seen multiple businesses go by the wayside that way.
So how do you go about, I'm just thinking as I listen, that you really have at least 3 different kinds of teams within the company. You have your manufacturing team, you have your business team, and I guess I would lump in there advertising, marketing, and all that.
Yes.
And then you have your people who are your customer service team. Is it a different way to go about and building and working with those teams, or?
It really isn't. You have to let people know that you value them.
Right.
And you have to be willing to let somebody make a mistake. If they come to you and they say, hey, I've got a great idea, it might be a great idea. But it's like, well, let's try it and see. And if it doesn't work, I'm glad they tried.
Right.
Because it means they're wanting to make the business better. And we find out that we change our business constantly. We're always evolving. If you stay the same, you get stale. The next thing you know, you're out of business. And, we're not a huge company. I have 300 employees, not counting the manufacturing. And every one of them is a valuable asset to the company. And
so in the 8 locations, your headquarters are in Kissimmee, Florida?
Well, we have a kind of a dual headquarters.
Okay.
We have our vice president is in Florida, Helen, who's an integral part of the business. She's been with us for 37 out of 47 years. And she's our I dotter and T crosser, so a very integral part. We're very lucky to have her, as we are almost all our employees. We have a lot of employees that have been with us for a lot of years. And the continuity of having employees year after year after year really saves you money. Even though some other businesses will say, well, how can you pay somebody that much? And I'm like, how can you not? Because every time you replace an employee or they're disgruntled, they're not happy, it costs you money. Yep. So, but no, basically valuing everybody, getting their input. They do different, things. Sales-wise, I personally go to all the stores still. I just turned 70. still love getting
So for the viewers, Youngstown, Nashville, Pigeon Forge, Orlando, Las Vegas,
and Gulfport, Mississippi.
Gulfport, Mississippi.
Yeah, we have
Okay.
a couple stores in Nashville, a couple in the Pigeon Forge area. Soon to be Arlington, Texas. We bought a building. We have a tenant that has a little bit of time left on the lease, but we're still slowly expanding.
So for all the different positions, are there certain characteristics you look for to get that team member, and then you valuing them once you get them is everything, but how do you decide who it is you bring into the team?
Well, it used to be I was HR.
Okay.
Yeah, we got a little too big for that. I have a head HR person who's very good at her job, and I have an assistant HR person who's very good at her job, and our regional manager. And they basically do the hiring now, but then, I can say yay or nay, and, there's something, we try to have, the best people we can. It is a struggle on the younger end of the employees because they've been so used to communicating via text, via computer, not communicating with, other people socially. There's a lot of socially awkward young people. There's also a lot of great young people. And we're fortunate to be able to find the great young people, the people that can communicate. Sales is very simple. If you can communicate with people, and I always liken it to, if you're in the grocery store line, if you're not talking to somebody in the line, probably wouldn't hire you. I'm that guy.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk to somebody in the line.
So back when you were HR and you were trying to build it up and get that foundation of team, how did you figure out in an interview or on a resume, or was it gut feeling when you met with them?
Well, I sat and I wasn't a true interviewer.
Okay.
I talked to them. I wanted to get to know them in the interview. I wanted to see what they're, what would you do in this situation? And I would do things that seemed kind of silly to some people. I had a calculator on my desk. I said, here, sell me this calculator, And I had one guy that just knocked my socks off selling me the calculator on my desk. And I'm like, okay, this guy's hired. I also like people that can think outside the box. Very important. I have a cousin whose son went to the University of Georgia. He's a little outside the box, a little mischievous, very smart kid. He took his family golf cart to college. He got a University of Georgia decal, put it on the side, a garbage can on the back, and put a rake hoe and a shovel in it, and used it his entire time that he was at college.
And just parked where he wanted to park.
That's the guy I want to hire.
Right?
Yeah, not bad.
The creative guy. Yeah.
But outside the box.
Yep. So as you started to think about expansion and now going to areas outside of, where you knew people and so forth, how did you decide where to go? And then once you were in a new area, how do you find those people to have that interview and tell them to sell you the calculator?
Yeah. Well, by the time we were getting that big, I had HR people, and they actually go to the town. We do hiring fairs. We post them on multiple media things like Indeed and so forth, and they go through the resumes, they comb them down, and then they call in for one-on-one interviews. They'll actually go into town, rent a room, a business room like we're in now, and interview the people. And because basically what we do is I go to, usually I'm always in tourist areas with the exception of where I started. We find that the tourist areas are really good for our business, but we find, we just opened Gulfport 2 months ago. We were very lucky. We got an amazing crew. We also pay them more than the competitors, even just to start out. So we give them a reason to want the job. We give them a reason to want to stay. And we make them feel instantly part of a team. And it's just so I can't stress how important it is that everybody's valued. I'll say it time and time again, but it's.
Well, and usually the simplest things, the most fundamental things, as I listen, not unlike a player on my team or people I'm working with now, you have to genuinely care about them and make sure they understand that, they're valued. And two, sometimes and oftentimes you feel value based upon, well, are they compensating me? They're telling me they care about me. Now, are you compensating me?
Yeah.
And, it's so what would you tell the people, one of the things I'm involved with now with the state of Ohio is thinking about this workforce education need we have with all these companies that the DeWine administration, started by the Kasich administration, Jobs Ohio brought all these companies. We've got Intel coming. We've got Anduril. We've got Joby Aviation going to build flying taxis. We got a new tissue paper company up in Defiance. We've got Honda starting new plants. We got Ford. We've got unbelievable opportunities. And we know that the biggest challenge is building that workforce. And so what would you tell us at the state of Ohio that could be a helpful strategy that would help us try to get the right workforce and keep it?
Well, that's a pretty tough question.
It is a tough one. No, I mean, that's
because
why
it's the toughest thing in business is the workforce.
Yep.
And that's why I was glad to see you were involved in that. And because the number one problem in any business, talk to any business person, is finding good help. Yep. I'm doing it on a much smaller scale than Intel. Intel, obviously they're going to have to give somebody an opportunity to create a career where they can advance. If there's no advancement when you go to a job, why go? Not everybody works obviously you want the money, but not everybody works just for the money. They want to be able to advance, and along with that comes more money. But very difficult to, on a mass scale like that. I probably don't have a great answer except for pay them competitively, better than they could get somewhere else, give them room for advancement, and, even on a big company, make them part of the team. It's, I say it over and over, but, making them feel part of the team is really integral.
We did a study at the state. They did it before I jumped aboard and ended up with, 2 North Stars to the workforce need thing. One was we've got to somehow increase the workforce participation in our state because higher percent chance of someone wanting to be in Ohio is if they already are in Ohio. Of course, we want to convince families to move into Ohio and so forth but do a better job in our state, and everybody's important, as you say, whether it's someone coming out of corrections or someone coming out of recovery and addiction, whatever. We need as many good people as we can. And then the other North Star that the study came up with was we've got to raise wage because you got to have something, for our people to aspire to. There's competition in wages. The more need there is, the law of supply and demand, right? And so it's going to be an interesting. We're going to try to do it regionally in the state to help everyone in the state understand what their specific needs are, so that the K through 12 and the career and tech centers and the 2-year schools and the 4-year schools and the trade schools and the whatever can figure out, okay, here's our target, here's what we need. And then hopefully when it becomes a little more personal, and I just had a meeting with Gordon Goff, who's the head of the Retailers Association here in Ohio, and he had a really cool thing about some of the things they're doing in high schools to train people to know customer service and then go get some of those retail jobs while they're in school, while they're in college. Do you have some kids working their way through school or learning those valuable lessons as you go?
Yeah, we do. We have, we actually do hire some kids that are still in high school, part-time. And we try to bring them along. We have a lot of them that stay. I have a manager in Pigeon Forge who most people probably would never hire as a manager because she's 19.
Wow.
And that's our second busiest store. She's an incredible employee. She works hard. She has the respect of all the employees at 19. And she started
In high school.
Yeah. So, and she's worked her way up to manager. Well, at 19 to be making manager's wages in our company is incredible.
Right.
Yeah. And there's no incentive for her to even look for another job. Yeah. We don't even have to think, oh, she's going to go find a job somewhere else because she loves where she's at. She's making incredible money for 19, actually really good money for somebody 40. But, we don't go by age or gender. We just go by who's the best person for the job,
Hey teammates, I want to tell you about a project we're working on with Youngstown State University. One of the ways Ellen and I have decided to give back is through the Tressel Institute for Leadership and Teamwork. We've collected a set of successful business and nonprofit leaders to serve as guest servant leaders in partnership with the Sokolov Honors College to teach university students teamwork, leadership, and personal skills. We teach from a foundation built on gratitude, excellence, hope, love, and selflessness. If you're a young person or parent helping to search for a unique college experience, you can learn more at tresselinstitute.ysu.edu or ysu.edu. Links will be provided in the show notes.
So as you think back through the ups and downs, and you have the importance of your care for the team. So part of the reason you wanted to be successful was because you had all these teammates counting on you. What can you tell the viewers about that reality that you're going to have ups and downs, and what is it? What is that courage, to press on like you've done more than once? It's not like you had one moment where times were tough. You probably had numerous moments.
Yeah. Well, I will tell you, almost everybody I know that is in business, that's an entrepreneur, there's very few, and there are some, that started their business, became wildly successful, and stayed that way. That is not the normal.
Right.
Almost everybody I know, and I know a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of business people. I network with a lot of business people, and almost every one of them has the same story. I was 2 days away from being broke, or I was broke.
Right.
And because you have to rapidly change. And if you're not catching up with the change of what's going on in the business, you're not going to be in business. But almost everybody I know, I know a guy that started a boot manufacturing, longtime friend of mine in Mexico, and he went broke on a Friday. 2 weeks later, on a Monday, he reopened on a much smaller scale, grew it into a wildly successful business. But he figured out what he did wrong, and here's what I need to do right. The biggest thing is I see people that go out of business, and I'll talk to them, and they'll say, well, I did things the way I always did them. They always worked. Well, that's not the way you're going to be successful. The way you're going to be successful is, number one, you have to always anticipate a problem. What's going to happen? I had a gentleman years ago, was a salesman, an older fellow, and he told me, he said, I was getting ready to open a couple stores early in the career, and he said, if you can't afford to open them and not make any money, then you shouldn't open them. I didn't listen. I opened them, and then all of a sudden I wasn't making any money. So that was a valuable lesson learned, and never to, I've had to roll the dice many times in my career. At this point in my career, there's no dice rolling because, we have a formula and we have the wherewithal to back it up if in a very fortunate position. If business is, we have a recession or anything, we'll still be here. And that's a good spot to be in, but it was not the spot I was always in.
So how did you choose the locations? You said tourist areas, but it's probably expensive to go into tourist areas.
Well, very, very fortunate on my first tourist store downtown Nashville. It hadn't hit its peak yet.
Nashville hadn't.
It hadn't hit its peak. It was really busy. We were amazed. When I first went there, I rented the building, and the rent was cheap. And I was amazed. I was like, wow, there was a store there, and it was owned by a big boot company, and they went bankrupt. And I bought it through the bankruptcy. And I'm like, how did they not make money? This is a really good location. Well, then the owner of the building had bought a few buildings and then needed to sell. And I bought the building, and the bank advised me against it. They didn't even want to lend the money on it at the time. My accountants were against it. People in the company were against it. And I said, but I know it's good. We might be overpaying a little bit for it, but it'll come out in the wash because we have nowhere else to go. Fortunately, we get offers on the building almost every week.
What year was that?
That was 2006 when I bought the building.
Nashville's changed a bunch since 2006.
Unbelievable.
Right?
My property tax is higher than my rent was.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. As a matter of fact, if we didn't own the building, I wouldn't even be able to get a spot down there. The big bars buy all the property up,
right,
and then they pay like like Luke Combs or somebody to put their name on the bar.
Yep.
And they can afford to pay more rent because the alcohol has a much higher markup than Boots.
Right. So was that your first location out of Youngstown, the Nashville one?
No. Along the way, I had Youngstown, then I opened Canton.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, had a store in Canton. Excuse me. And I had opened, multiple stores. But again, it was when I really couldn't afford to expand. I wasn't into private label yet. So I ended up closing those stores.
So what was Nashville then, the first one after the...
Yeah, the first that was where we knew. Once I got there, I said, okay, we're going to be just fine.
And then Pigeon Forge was right after that?
Pigeon Forge was after that.
Which is how far from Nashville?
About 3 hours and 20 minutes.
Much? Okay. Yeah. That's by Knoxville?
It's about an hour from Knoxville. It's by Dollywood, right before you go up into Gatlinburg. And then we have one in Severeville, which is about 13 miles away.
Kind of like a suburban community, a Severeville?
Yeah, it's suburban, but where you still get a ton of tourists because a lot of them, that's the way they come in. And we're so busy, it sounds crazy. One store is not enough in the market.
Wow.
Same thing with Nashville. We have a store in the mall, Opry Mills Mall, and it does phenomenal too.
So what was the next state after Tennessee?
Then we went to Florida.
Okay.
Yeah, I went to Orlando. Again, a tourist area.
Yep.
Yeah.
And just one store there?
Well, I had one there, and we had one in Lake City. And Lake City, Florida was a small town.
Yeah.
But you had the other main highway coming down. And we had billboards, and we did a lot of business there. That was one we unfortunately lost. We'd been there 10 years, and our lease was up, and they didn't renew it. They sold it to a big corporation, and they bought the whole property. So we moved that store. We took all that inventory and moved it to Gulfport, Mississippi, which is a kind of a 4 to 5 state tourist area. People, especially in the summer, coming to the beaches. But
so who was on your strategic team?
Well, the person that actually picks the locations is pretty much me.
Okay.
I go, I'll fly, but I'll take people with me and I get their opinion. It's, hey, what do you think of this? And what do you think of this? But like when I bought the building in Arlington, we were actually driving around with a realtor and it wasn't for sale yet. And I was with a mutual friend of ours, Buzz. And the realtor gets a phone call while we're in the car, and I'm highly disappointed. I can't find anything I want, but I know I want to be there. As luck would have it, the realtor gets a call and asks, do you know anybody that might want this building? The owner's thinking about selling it. And he said, yeah, we'll go take a look at it. We pulled in the parking lot, and I said, okay, how much is it? And let's, work a deal. And I bought it immediately because I knew there was no ifs, ands, or buts. That was a perfect building.
And so that's the one by the ballparks and all
Yeah,
that?
the Dallas Cowboys sit behind us, the Texas Rangers, Six Flags, the Convention Center, multiple hotels, big entertainment district, Texas Live. We do have a tenant in there, as I said earlier, for about 12 months, but we're working with them, and we think they'll get out sooner.
So is there a cultural difference between building teams in Ohio, Tennessee, Florida, and Texas, do you think?
Oh, absolutely.
Is there?
Yeah. The Tennessee and in Florida in the South, I don't know how to describe it, but everybody is sir and ma'am.
Huh.
Yeah. And it's Mr. Rick, Miss Helen.
Okay.
Not that we aren't polite in Ohio, because we are. The one thing I love about Youngstown is I moved to Youngstown for a year in 1977. We're still there.
Right.
Are the people. Great, probably the greatest people in the whole state are in our area there. But the team it's a little different. Mm-hmm. It's a little different culture. But in the end, it's really not so different. It's just there's a little different nuances. But people are still people. They want to be valued. They want to be rewarded.
How about Las Vegas? Building the team there different?
You know what? I thought it would be, but we were very fortunate. We have an incredible manager. It's a girl named Maria and she's from the Philippines. And you talk about hard workers. The Filipinos, if you go on a cruise ship, they're the ones doing all the work. They work really hard because, if they're here, they're working really hard. If they're on a cruise ship, they're working really hard because the alternative is they have nothing.
Right. Opportunity.
If you're not working, you're starving. So,
Right.
So they work very hard. Maria is second generation, but it's in her family, it's instilled. And she's an amazing, hardworking person. And, as our really are. We don't have anybody that I say is, not good.
Well, a big part of team is leadership, right? And so your managers and your people who train your managers. And so how did you find someone like Maria? I mean,
well, my HR found.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
To be quite honest with you, they do a really good job. They
they knew what they were looking for.
They knew what they're looking for, and then they actually when we hired for that position, we made a mistake. We gave her the assistant manager's position, and we hired this one gentleman for manager, and he was a good manager. But when he left, probably shouldn't say this, hope he doesn't watch. She was way better.
Yeah.
She just was a better manager.
Yep.
Yeah, and more hands-on. And we make mistakes.
Sure.
Like everybody. We try to keep our mistakes to a minimum.
Yep.
And, if you don't make mistakes, something's wrong. Yep. You just don't know you're not making them.
We used to say that in recruiting in football. We said, hey, look, we're not geniuses. We're not going to know that A.J. Hawk was going to become, All-American. He was a good player, whatever. Blossomed bigger than, most people ever thought he would. That wasn't because we necessarily saw that, but we wanted to eliminate our mistakes. We wanted to have as few guys that couldn't contribute. Now, they might not all be All-Americans, but they could be great team members.
Yeah.
And to me, that was always the measuring stick was if we brought someone in, could they help along the continuum of whatever, we needed to get done, but we were going to make mistakes. It's part of the deal. So since I brought up sports, since you and I are Cleveland natives, both, Lake County. Were you born in Lake County?
Yeah, Willoughby.
Yep, I was born in Lake County. So we've watched the Cleveland Browns and the Indians and Guardians and Cavs and so forth. Have you kept up with the Cavs as a team this year?
Yeah, it's incredible what they've accomplished.
So why do you think they're different than they were a year ago as far as a team?
Well, I'm not an expert, but I think it was all about the coach. Because they had the same players they had the year before. They have a different coach, and now they're winning. He wanted to win. And I don't know that the other coach didn't want to win, but maybe he didn't know how.
Well, I've always felt in coaching, timing is everything. And, sometimes if you come in the timing of building, sometimes you don't get to enjoy the reaching the potential. Other times, if you're fortunate to come in and like the timing was right. I know when we got to Ohio State, I thought one of our advantages is, I think our players are really hungry, and I think the timing is right, and they're a year older. And one thing as I watch the Cavs is, those guys are all a year older than they were, and it's going to be interesting to watch them here down the stretch, but they seem to be an unselfish group, and what appears to me is that they're playing more players, 10, 11 players than maybe we historically have, and that goes to your key point is everyone's got to feel valued, and if every single person on that bench feels like they're valued, there's something about building that team. And what was, because I know you watched the Browns forever, you still watch the Browns, you're one of their greatest boosters. What's the best Browns team you recall, and why do you think they were the best team?
I don't know. Well, when Mackenbiner played, I thought that was a great team. They were fun to watch. They were exciting. But you and I are both the same. We'll watch them no matter what.
Well, that's right.
And I always get mad, and I say, "Oh, geez, I can't watch anymore." And then I get sucked right back in because just deep down, I'm a diehard Browns fan, and
Well, and I think when a lot of us old Browns fans look back and see the Mackenbiner time and so forth, there seemed to be an unselfishness about that team that, both running backs, one wasn't, getting more carries than the others necessarily. Bernie was a young quarterback, and he wasn't all about how many throws am I going to get. Who was the head coach at that time? Schottenheimer?
Yeah.
It was Marty? Yeah. Marty, was going to sell the importance of team and defense and, hard nose. And were you at the game where Denver had the drive?
I was.
Oh, I hate to bring up that.
Yeah, that was one of those moments, you can't take it too seriously, but that put me in a funk for, the rest of the season, the rest of the year.
So I'll tell you my story about when we were playing the Raiders in '81, I think it was. We win the game, we go to the Super Bowl, and you remember we threw the interception in the end zone, and if it had been incomplete, we probably could have kicked a field goal and won the thing. Well, I was sitting in the living room of a recruit. I was coaching at Syracuse at the time, and we had just gotten to Syracuse, and our new head coach was Dick McPherson. Well, Dick was on the defensive staff of the Browns, so he wasn't with us yet recruiting for Syracuse, and so it was pretty cool for us out recruiting, telling these guys that, hey, our head coach is, who's coming in he's probably heading to the Super Bowl, and that's a big deal to kids. And so I was sitting in Sandusky, Ohio, with a kid named Bob Brodsky, big tight end, good-looking guy. Ended up playing 2 years tight end, then moved to tackle and played in the NFL for 10 years. But anyway, I was ecstatic, Look at my head coach is going to be going to the Super Bowl. That's going to do nothing but enhance our recruiting. And then we threw the interception. And they still talk about Red Right 88, which was the play call. And it's like, so we've lived through a lot of those. But Just like when we won the national championship in 2002, you wouldn't believe the number of letters I got that said, "I can die happy. I never thought this would happen again," because it's been 34 years. So maybe we'll get to write a letter to the Browns coach that we can die happy because we won that Super Bowl. We'll see. But let me shift to one last thing, because I think boards, and I don't know if your company has a board or not, but boards are so important for the success of companies. I felt at Youngstown State our board was critical. You're on the Youngstown State University Foundation board. The Youngstown State Foundation, thank goodness we have that, because it really makes a difference for our students. As you think about the time spent on the board, and no one gets paid for it, there are paid boards and then there are free boards. What do you think's been the key to building a team on a board like you guys have with the Youngstown State University Foundation?
Well, everybody on that board, I will tell you right now, gives 110%. And they do it no charge.
Right.
I feel honored to be on the board because, I think you deserve, or not deserve, you should give back. When you're fortunate enough to be able to give back, whether you can give money and time or both, but even just the time, to help out the young people that need help. And, we created a lot of scholarships.
Oh, boy.
And the foundation is exceptionally well run. I'm on the finance committee, the executive board, and I'm also, for some reason, the head of HR. But I can tell you, I look at like-size universities, and we run ours for a whole lot less than they run theirs. We have a whole lot less people doing it, and we raise more money.
Yep.
Of course, part of the reason is a gentleman named Jim Tressel.
Well, that was old history,
Yeah, but we do. We value the time. I've been on it for years, and I like doing it. I like to do anything that's involved in a charity. Very seldom will a charity call up and I'll say no. I don't think I've ever said no.
No.
As long as it's a good charity, we're in.
Yep.
And people know we're in. And I feel, fortunate to be able to give back. A couple of my favorites are, children's cancer. I think that's a horrific thing. And then the Boys and Girls Club, we do Boys and Girls Club in Youngstown. We do it in Tennessee also. Because that is a great club.
Yeah.
Some of these kids have nothing. They have no home life. Most of them, if they have a parent, it's a single parent. And this is a normalcy for them. They can come in, and I think it's a great club and very, very interesting.
And they get mentors, and
Yeah.
It's just...
Yeah. What's really interesting in Nashville, they actually have a recording studio for the Boys and Girls Club.
Wow, which makes sense. Right.
Yeah. They had a young lady a couple of years ago. We go to a dinner they have, and we went to the dinner, and they had a young lady who got into singing country music, and she performed on stage, and she was really good. Wow. But she wouldn't have had that opportunity because she came from a broken family, no money, and not much structure.
Yep.
But they brought her in. She had mentors, and she actually learned how to sing.
Well, that people that are willing to spend their time and effort to serve on boards or to back causes are so critical to the fabric of our country. And I know this, if Youngstown State University didn't have a great board and a great foundation and foundation board, it would have been harder. It would have been harder to serve those 12,000 students and make a difference for the area groups. And the other one I have to say, because you are at every great cause in the Youngstown area, and it sounds like in Nashville too, and everywhere else you have business, but you've been a great leader for our Youngstown State University Penguin Club and their huddle, which is their football thing, and I guess I say that because sometimes people look at success in business and don't realize how far out the tentacles go beyond simply your 300 and some employees, but what you do for your communities. And so I'm going to wrap it up with these two thoughts. One is, it's crystal clear, and you've heard it from so many people, you have to value and deeply care for your people. Doesn't matter if it's a football team, if it's a hospital, if it's a business like your own. It doesn't matter what the job is. And the other thing that to me came through loud and clear is that you've got to compensate them fairly and maybe better than you think you can. And if so, you have a chance, to really build that team, because again, it gives them another feeling that, I'm valued. And so to me, if our viewers took nothing else from this, if they'll do that, they're going to help their team.
Absolutely.
This has been fun. Rick and I occasionally would have a sip of bourbon or something, and I get a lot of wisdom from him. But this has been a lot of fun, and he's been a blessing to our Youngstown State community and to the Nashville community, and we're lucky that he's on our team. So until the next time, it's all about the team.